Special Envoys and coordinators combating anti-Semitism. Perhaps you are the most important people facing the Jewish, helping the Jewish people fight anti-Semitism, and I thank you for that. The World Jewish Congress invited you because you told us you wanted to exchange views, share ideas, and evaluate progress and fight against anti-Semitism. I want to thank the European Commission Coordinator on Combating Anti-Semitism, Katharina von Schnurbein. Katharina, thank you. A key partner to World Jewish Congress in leading this initiative, and the Commissioner of the Federal Government for Jewish Life in Germany and the fight against anti-Semitism, Dr. Felix Klein, who last night, for those of you, he was the man in the middle playing in the court. Was it quartet or was it quartet? And especially the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, Elan Carr. Okay, enough of my key remarks. I said something last night in a speech that I said after 3 decades, anti-Semitism has now reared its head. I rethought that question. Anti-Semitism, even after 1945, was here. It was quiet, underground, but it was here. It didn't disappear, but nobody wanted to be associated with the Nazis. Nobody wanted to speak out, but it was here. Also, this was before the internet. What we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, more like 5 years, is that for the first time, people can be anti-Semitic and have no consequences. What we've seen more and more here in Germany, but also all around the world, is that there's no laws. One of the things I spoke about yesterday was the question of neo-Nazi parties. We have pictures of them. We have pictures of them speaking. Yes, they do not have swastikas, and they don't necessarily have pictures of Hitler, but everything else is a Nazi ideology. And the interesting thing is, if you don't have a swastika and you don't lift your arm up in a salute, you're not breaking any law. What does it say about Germany that you can have Nazi ideology and get away with it? Also, in certain political parties, I won't be so specific, I asked the intelligence service in America how many people there are what you would call neo-Nazis, the leaders and other people. Got the names. Frightening, because they're there, they're in the public view, and Germany does nothing, because they can't do anything. There's no laws there. The man who tried to kill the people in Halle, 27-year-old person, lone wolf. Where did he get the information? It didn't come from the air. It came over the internet. And the internet was someone, he was a guy alone. He was a person who, frankly, probably sat home and looked at the internet and got angry. There's no ability to stop this stuff coming. There is, but no one takes it on. We can find out where every piece on the internet comes from if we want to. No one's doing it. And the real question is, we can have all the meetings we want in the world, unless there's a will on perhaps the German government. And at the end of the meeting, I spoke to a person who was a judge. And I said, how do you allow this to happen? He said, there's no law against it. So what does that mean? Now, interesting enough, the comment of the mother of the person, I can't give you exact German translation, but what she really said is, my son is a good person, I'm sorry he did this. But you have to understand what we feel about Jewish people. And the most important part She was a teacher. And what does that say about Germany? What does it say about what's happening? Lastly, when we talk about teachers, education. The education today in European schools, as well as American, but particularly German schools, I'm leaving this in Germany because we're on German. They read about it. They don't see pictures. They read about it. The teachers are not trained how to teach it, and it's a subject just like any others. I remember when I was 16 years old, I went with my school, I was in a German school at the time, to Dachau. I remember listening to my fellow classmates speak. For them, this was 15, 20 years after Auschwitz. They were speaking about Dachau and what happened to the Jews almost the same way you'd speak about what happened to the Christians in the Colosseum. It wasn't recent. What happened is their parents told them nothing. They were embarrassed. So the children, the only thing they knew was what they learned in school, was what's in the books. We are working now on a thing called the Auschwitz Legacy. I'm working with several people from Auschwitz. And what it is, it's a 4-part thing that will be shown on January 27th all throughout the world, particularly in Germany. What it will be is first a famous figure, either a sports figure or something that people relate to, that students relate to. And he or she will say, you know, I never understood what anti-Semitism was about. I had Jewish classmates and I made jokes about them, and I didn't realize what it was about. But after I saw the film you're about to see, you realize how bad this is. And then we'll show a 45-minute film starting from 1923, or even earlier, about the growth of anti-Semitism, particularly in Germany. This was not a new phenomenon. Having been an ambassador in Vienna, Vienna still beats Austria in anti-Semitism. But the fact is that this film will show everything up to the concentration camps. We'll be very sensitive to who's seeing it, but they will see the gruesome death people, and they'll be shocked. Then, that's the second part. The third part, we have, through the Steven Spielberg Foundation, the Shaw Foundation, we have something like 20 or 30,000 survivors who gave testimonies. We'll pick 5 or 6 German ones, for example, and you'll hear about a man or woman saying, you know, I was a young child, they came in, they shot my parents, and they took my baby sister and they threw her against the wall and killed her. 4 or 5 different things. That's the third part. The fourth part will be, we'll work with the teacher, how to talk with the children about what happened. I believe this will have a major effect on education, not just reading in the book. That is the critical element. The second element is there must be laws in Germany and Europe, really strong laws. I gave the example last night of a Syrian person, crazy person coming in, saying things about Jews, terrible Jews. I would use the language here, but I don't think it's appropriate. He had a knife. He was trying to kill people. The police stopped him, took the knife away, and released him. What does that say? I was speaking with various people yesterday. One of the problems is the police are not trained for this. And frankly, I think if you gave a good assessment of the police, at least a third of them are basically anti-Semitic. And the question is, how can you expect them to carry out things when you have marches in Chemnitz and Dortmund and the police stand by there? For us, it's very reminiscent of the police standing by during Kristallnacht and not allowing the firemen to get there. All these things come together. And in a way, I'm glad Halle happened, I'm delighted that 50 people were not massacred. But the question is, where were the police? And the fact is, afterwards, it took the police 15 to 20 minutes to get there. Now, Hollow is not such a big place, and there's not much traffic. You can walk there in less than 15 minutes. It's because they didn't care. Or they cared, but they didn't care. I guarantee you, if someone had gone in and trying to kill 10 German citizens who were not Jewish, the police would have been there in 5 minutes. This is what we're facing. We can have all the conferences we want. The question is, I said, we want action, not words. We want laws that really mean something. And one thing about Germany, you specialize in laws. And the fact is that this judge told me there was no law against neo-Nazi parties. They can have all the ideology they want. We can have all the means we want, unless someone really says we have to change it. It has to change. We can give speeches, and I heard some great speeches last night, but the speeches are about we must do something against it. No one said, I make myself, no one said, this is what I plan to do. We heard we must stop it, but no one said we have to change this law and that law. Back in New York, we have films of neo-Nazi groups meeting. We have the speeches they make. The speeches are right out of Hitler. If we have the films, I guarantee Germany has the films. And what do we do with them? Nothing. That's the question. That's my speech. I didn't necessarily use my notes because when I read them, I get bored. So the fact is, that's what we should do. And I must tell you, as they say in German, die Zeit ist reif. It's jetzt. We must do everything. Wir müssen alle Hebel in Bewegung setzen. How's that for a good expression? I'm using my old German. Thank you very much for listening. And then I turn it over to Dr. Felix Klein, the great musician, and also in this part-time he does other things for the Jewish people.